Massive profits for big tech. Apple, Microsoft and Google rake in a combined $5 billion a week, fueled by the pandemic. And as it profits over people, the corporate sponsors of the Beijing Winter Olympics face backlash from US lawmakers. Hello and a very warm welcome to World Business Report with me, Ben Boulos. In just a moment, we'll have more on that grilling of the likes of Coca-Cola and Visa and find out how they fared on Tuesday. But before that, let's talk about big tech, because the tech giants Apple, Google and Microsoft have all smashed analyst expectations in updates that they gave after the bell on Wall Street. Apple's profits nearly doubled to $21.7 billion in the 3 months to the end of June, as customers spent money buying the more expensive 5G iPhones, the latest handsets. Google's parent company, Alphabet, also reported on Tuesday that quarterly sales and profits had surged to record highs. For example, its video platform YouTube saw advertising revenue jump to $7 billion in that quarter. And Microsoft saw a $16.5 billion profit at the same time due to huge demand for its cloud services and games. Let's find out what the markets, market movers, the investors make of all this. Richard Hunter, head of markets at Interactive Investor, joins us now. Richard, I suppose expectations were high already, weren't they, for tech companies, given how much we've come to rely on technology, cloud services and the hardware, the devices and so on during the pandemic. But this even beat those expectations, even as high as they were.
No, you're absolutely right, Ben. Of course, what normally happens leading into quarterly results is that companies manage down their expectations and then go on to beat them, hopefully. In terms of this particular quarter, particularly against the corresponding quarter in 2020, expectations were extremely high and companies allowed those expectations to stay high. Even that being said, just about all of the three tech companies which reported yesterday did smash expectations. Of course, that in turn leads to a slight concern over whether this is peak earnings this particular quarter, and of course how much of our changing technology habits are here to stay, given the slow return to normality we're now seeing.
Richard, speaking of technology, can you do us a favour? Your mic is just rubbing on your shirt. Can you just move it off there slightly so we can hear what you're saying a little more clearly? Just under your collar, if you just lift it up for us. And we keep hearing about the microchip shortage. It must be really frustrating for tech companies that see this increase in demand for their products, and yet they can't get the parts that are so vital to make them, or at least it's harder, it's more expensive to get hold of those parts.
Yes, you're right. And of course, that has had an impact on the tech companies in the States, such as Intel, which obviously are those chip makers. That being said, of course, in terms of what we've seen from sales of Apple phones, for example, over the last quarter, that seems to have been less of an impact. But what we're seeing from a global viewpoint is, in terms of supply and demand is clearly coming back very strongly indeed. And just for the moment, supply isn't necessarily able to keep up with that. So we've seen some concerns around the supply chain, some concerns around the prices of raw materials, which of course has had a slight inflationary impact. But even so, that being said, the likes of Apple continue to shoot the lights out with their numbers.
And the other side of the businesses that seem to be doing well are the ones that rely on the demand for cloud services that a lot of workplaces have really come to not just embrace, but rely on with people working from home. And that really benefited the likes of Microsoft.
Yeah, very much so. Microsoft has pretty much re-energised and redefined this business over the last few years, and it is now really starting to reap the rewards with that cloud business. Not only the companies that are relying on it, as you say, with the general working from home environment, but also, of course, with members of staff being dotted around the country, things like cyber security and the general robustness of those systems are extremely important on a company-wide level. That's from small to medium to large businesses, and the likes of Microsoft really are reaping the rewards.
OK, Richard, thank you very much for that. Richard Hunter there from Interactive Investor. Right, let's turn our focus to the United States now, where lawmakers have been grilling corporate sponsors of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. The likes of Coca-Cola, Visa, Intel and Airbnb have been accused of putting profits ahead of accusations of genocide in China. Corporate giants have been asked if the Games should be relocated or postponed due to concerns over human rights violations. Our Asia business reporter Katie Silver explains.
This was part of a congressional hearing that looks at human rights in China, and really to define this exchange as fiery would be something of an understatement. Really what they're saying is they were pushing for these big companies to take their sponsorship out of Beijing. One lawmaker, for instance, said that staying behind was like helping Beijing to reap the rewards in prestige and propaganda, and even said it would be akin to or parallel to staying and supporting Hitler in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Now, this is because the US asserts that there is genocide occurring in the Xinjiang region of China, and human rights experts, for their part, for example, say that at the moment we're seeing about 1 million Uyghur Muslims incarcerated and subject to forced labour in the area. Now, Beijing denies that there is genocide occurring and says instead what's happening there is vocational training sessions.
And Katie, how did the companies respond?
Well, when asked if the Olympics, for example, should be moved or delayed, really there was very little comment. And the companies, for their part, said that they had very little influence over this. Visa, for example, said it doesn't have a specific opinion about whether or not this should occur, and that it's really not a decision for sponsors to make. Airbnb, for its part, was criticised, for example, for adhering to local laws and practices that lawmakers in the US said basically ban Uyghurs from staying in their properties. And Intel, perhaps, it was the most specific, really. It says that it doesn't source any materials from Xinjiang and works to avoid forced labour. But despite this, it did very little to appease lawmakers. One, for example, was particularly fiery. That was Republican Tom Cotton, Senator Tom Cotton. He's been a very strong critic of China. And he said, for instance, about this, and I'll read you this quote, that it was the most pathetic, disgraceful hearing he'd participated in his 8 years in Congress.
Katie Silver there for us in Singapore. Now, we've all heard of family businesses being passed down through the generations, but what about when a child starts a business, then hires their own father? Well, that's exactly what happened with a digital agency called Three Heads. We've been speaking to father and son, or son and father, to see how they make things work for our CEO Secrets series.
It's one of the first things that we said, that look, when we're at work, you're going to have to call me Roy, because I don't want you talking to me on a Zoom call and calling me Dad, because it just seems a bit... You know, it's a bit sort of, it's not professional enough. At home he's Dad, but here he's Roy. Like, I have to do it, because the thing I find is if I'm in a sales pitch and I'm saying, Dad, no, Dad, do that. Or if I've got my staff here, they see him as Roy. I've got to respect him and see him as Roy as well, you know? It was a really peculiar thing to begin with. It's become sort of a little bit more sort of human nature now, I suppose. So just because they're family doesn't mean that you can speak to them in any different way. You still speak to them like at work, then it's completely different to if you would at home. So you've got to take that into account, right? Well, that's your answer. Nah. I think I hadn't appreciated quite how much clients liked working with the family business.
Right, let's take a look at some of the other main business stories. And Barbie dolls are about to get more expensive. The toy maker Mattel said that it has to raise prices of its toys in the run-up to Christmas. Yeah, they're talking about Christmas already, as the company faces higher costs. It's due to rising raw material costs and shipping costs as the global economy recovers from the pandemic. The announcement came as Mattel announced better than expected sales of more than $1 billion. Senior UK cabinet ministers will discuss allowing fully vaccinated travellers from the EU and US to avoid quarantine when they arrive in England. Sources said the isolation exemption was likely to be discussed at the COVID operations meeting on Wednesday. Starbucks has reported its earnings for the quarter, with sales up 73% year on year as customers flock back to stores after staying away during the height of the pandemic. The coffee chain has also been pushing its digital business. Its rewards program grew by half, and its ready-to-drink range has done well. However, the company lowered its forecast to China for this year, its second largest market, seeing shares drop in extended trading. The UK economy will grow faster than expected this year as it recovers from the COVID pandemic. This is according to the latest forecast from the International Monetary Fund. It now predicts the UK economy will grow by 7% in 2021, but the picture was much bleaker for developing countries, with the IMF warning of slower growth due to a limited vaccine rollout. Don't forget, you can reach me and the team here on social media. But for now, that is World Business Report. Thanks for watching. I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.